Hello mathematicians. Today we are working on Module 4, Lesson 22. In this lesson we will compare the size of the product to the size of the factors. For our first problems we're going to compare 4/4 times 12 inches, 3/4 times 12 inches, and 5/4 times 12 inches. And remember the product, we're comparing the product, the answer, in relationship to the factors. So the factors are the items that you're multiplying together. So this is factors 3/4, here's the other factor, that's 12 inches. In comparison to the answers, what are we going to get once we solve these problems? So let's look at the first one, 4/4 times 12 inches. Well, I can reason 4/4 is equal to 1, so I know the answer already. It's going to be 12 inches, because 1 times 12 inches is going to equal to 12 inches. The next problem is 3/4 times 12 inches. So I know that the answer for this, right, 3/4 is less than 1. So if I'm multiplying 12 inches by something that's less than 1, then I know that my answer, right, is going to be, my answer here is going to be 3/4 times 12 inches is going to be less than 12 inches as my answer, because I know that it's not multiplied by a whole number. It's multiplied by a fraction of a whole. In the last problem, we have a factor of 5/4 times 12 inches. We know that 5/4 is a fraction that is greater than 1, so this answer is going to be greater than 12 inches. So 5/4 times 12 is going to be bigger than 12 inches. The same concept can be applied with fractions multiplied by other fractions. So we have 4/4. So this is 1 times 1/3. So we know that this is going to be equal to that fraction 1/3. The next problem, 3/4, again, is smaller than 1 or less than 1. So that multiplied times 1/3, that means that it's going to be less than 1/3 is the answer. And the last one, 5/4 times 1/3, means the answer for this problem is going to be greater than 1/3. With these next problems, we're going to look at 1/2 and we're going to scale them by the other fractions here. And we're going to see what happens to this. Is the answer is going to be equal to 1/2, more than 1/2, or less than 1/2. So we have 1/2 times 5/5, so that means it's going to be equal to 1/2. We have 1/2 times 3/5, and 3/5 is a fraction that is less than 1. So we know that 1/2 times something less than 1, that's going to be less than 1/2 as your answer. And then 1/2 times 9/5. 9/5 is a fraction that's greater than 1. So we know that that answer is going to be greater than 1/2. Our last problem for today is, at the book fair, Vald spends all of his money on new books. Pamela spends 2/3 as much as Vald. Eli spends 4/3 as much as Vald. Who spends the most and who spends the least? So here we have tape diagrams. I did Vald's money, and here's his tape diagram. And at this point, I don't know what this is going to be representing. So I need to go back up into our information and see what I can gather in order to figure out Vald's money. Then we have a space for Pamela's money and then Eli's money. So let's go back up to our word problem. And it says Pamela spent 2/3 as much as Vald, and then Eli spent 4/3 as much as Vald. So the denominator for both of these are in thirds. So I'm going to actually split Vald's into thirds. And now I can represent what Pamela is and also what Eli's is. So it says that Pamela spent 2/3 as much as Vald. So if Vald spent 3/3 or all of his money, then Pamela spent 2/3 as much as Vald. So that means she spent 2 of those pieces, right? Equivalent to 2/3 of his. And Eli spends 4/3. So he spends 1, 2, 3, and then an extra 4/3, right? For that amount of money. So we have there his 4/3. So now the question is asking me, who spent the most, who spent the least? So we know that Vald spent all of his money, which is equivalent to 3/3. And Pam was only 2/3. So I'm going to write hers as 2/3. And then Eli was 1, 2, 3, 4/3. So here we have our tape diagrams representing all three children. So who spent the most? Well, we know that Eli, right, spent the most because he spent 4/3 of as much as Vald, and there's Vald's. And then Pam, she only spent 2/3 of that same amount, so hers is the least. So we know that Eli spent the most, and Pamela spent the least. Thank you for watching today's video.